Deborah, let's start with Facebook. So this boycott got a lot of attention over the last several weeks, and obviously Facebook has been in the hot seat over policy issues, how they're handling misinformation as we approach a critical election. And yet, you look at the quarter, what are your main takeaways here?
Yeah, you're right. It was an incredible quarter, but not because of the advertiser boycott. We never really expected that the boycott would have had an impact on Facebook's revenue for the quarter. Number one, because the number of advertisers that did pull out wasn't a huge portion of Facebook's overall advertiser base. Number two, these advertisers, mostly the vast majority of them, only stayed out for the month of July. So they came roaring right back in August. Another thing that happened, I think, too, is that advertisers who maybe weren't already Facebook advertisers, or who maybe weren't spending as much during Q2 for a variety of reasons, they saw opportunities in Q3 when some advertisers pulled out. They filled those spots. And I think that led Facebook to have a much better quarter than a lot of people probably expected.
That said, Facebook is about to have its biggest test perhaps in the company history, making sure that it gets through this 2020 election with integrity, that the platform isn't undermined or weaponized. How do you expect Facebook to perform on and after November 3rd? Because it's not just election day. We had a guest yesterday saying it was going to be 78 days after November 3rd that we really had to worry about.
Yeah, it's definitely election uncertainty is going to be weighing on, I think, all of the tech companies that reported today. Facebook, as you mentioned, very much in the spotlight for reasons related to misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, negative sentiment, lots of sort of not good things happening on the content front on Facebook. And I do think that advertisers do need to worry about that, and many of them are worried about that. There have been a lot more discussions in the boardrooms and in the marketing planning meetings that I've been aware of, where advertisers are asking themselves, how much should we support Facebook going forward? Is this a platform we want our brands to be a part of? They're having those discussions, they're asking those questions. But the interesting thing is, and I think this is why I think Facebook is probably going to end up coming out okay in the end, is because Facebook works. It's been that way for quarter after quarter. We've seen Facebook's audience and then the number of users is substantial. Its ad targeting is incredible. Advertisers, at the same time, they tell me that they are concerned about the atmosphere of Facebook. They also say pretty much in the same breath that they can't live without Facebook for business reasons.
So why is Twitter telling such a different story? This user growth is definitely disappointing when you would think people would be joining the service to catch up ahead of the election.
And that was surprising to us as well. We really, when we looked at our internal quarterly estimates, as we only publish full year numbers for companies like Facebook and Twitter, but internally we try to track and guess what's going to happen on a quarterly basis. And we thought, looking at Q2 and how many users Twitter gained in Q2, that something similar would happen in Q3. I mean, certainly the amount of discussion and issues and everything that's kind of in Twitter's wheelhouse, that hasn't stopped in Q3. So the fact that they only gained, 1 million users this quarter is definitely something that we weren't expecting. On the other hand, though, on the revenue side, we actually didn't think Twitter was going to perform as well as they actually did. So what I think has happened is that Twitter has made some strides this quarter in being able to better monetize these users that it brought in Q2. So we've seen Twitter with the return of events. Twitter has been able to bring in advertisers who support sporting events and other things like that. We've seen Twitter continue to make progress, slow but sure, on the direct response front, which is huge for companies like Facebook. And I think that Twitter's also, because there are certain type of advertiser that wants to be in an environment where people are debating and talking and discussing all the news of the day, Twitter's been able to market itself pretty successfully as the place for those advertisers to reach those people. And so for those types of advertisers, it's become even more important.